So if you thought you were coming to an iridology workshop, you must be in the right place. Welcome. I'm glad you're with me today. Today we are going to spend a little while talking about digestive markers in the irises. We're really going to be focusing strictly on stomach today. We're not going to be looking at auxiliary digestive organs like the intestines or the liver or the pancreas. Now, regardless of that, whether your specialty is nutrition or herbology or some other holistic practice, I know you're going to leave our session today with information that you can use with your clients right away. One thing I've learned over my many years in the holistic wellness industry is that excellent healers keep learning. They know they don't know it all, and so congratulations for being in that small minority who continue to learn, who strive to be your best, and who strive to give the best to your clients. I am excited to have you with me. Now, we are a small group this morning, so I'm really going to be asking for lots of participation from you to make this more interesting for you. First off, I'd love it if you would take just a moment and in the questions box, if you would type in what your training is. Are you a herbalist or a homeopath, a nutritionist of some description? Do you do body work? Do you do energy work? Is there something else that you do that I'm not aware of or haven't thought of? So if you just take a minute and type that into the questions box, I would really appreciate it. I'm assuming you've got lightning fingers and you're typing as quickly as you can, and sometimes these things take just a moment to come through over the internet. Okay. So where we want to begin today is to look at spend just a moment rather looking at why iridology might be helpful for you in your practice. You might already be an iridologist, you might not be using it. Maybe you're looking to add to your training, or maybe you don't know anything about iridology at all and you are wanting to see how would this possibly integrate with what you do. So some of the challenges that you might be facing, these are really, really common. You don't know exactly where to start in your recommendations and setting your therapeutic priorities and sequences. This is huge. When you go to school, whether it's nutrition school or homeopathic school or somewhere like that, or herb school even, I've worked with a lot of herbalists because I am one of those as well, what I find is that what we learn in school is a lot of interesting and useful information, but we learn to apply it in a case study scenario. And we almost never learn how to break that down into bite-sized steps. So oftentimes you'll be given a case study to do and you need to write a complete diet, everything you would do for this person, everything you would recommend for this person. But in reality, what you've just created for them is totally impossible to do in one appointment. Totally overwhelming, not doable. And so that creates many, many problems within a practice because you're likely not going to have good follow-through with your clients. The second thing that creating massive programs like that does is it means that you can't develop your program while you are actually with your client. So you do your intake interview with your client, and that probably takes an hour to an hour and a half. And then you send your client away and you go on and you do another 3 or 4 or 5 hours of work on behalf of that client. And that time is probably time you're not getting paid for. So that when you meet with your client again, you've got this beautiful, all-encompassing, everything's there report that you are going to give them. And it's everything they'll ever need to know, not the best idea. Because when you do that, you overwhelm your clients with so much information that they usually don't come back after the second consultation. They don't know where to start. They don't know how to work with all this, and they could never, ever do it with any degree of competence, and so they just go away feeling frustrated. Or the other side is they come back for that second appointment, they get the report, you talk them through it, and you give them, or they grab the 2 or 3 little pieces out of that that they think are going to be the most useful, and that's what they take away, and they feel like they're set for life. So those are some massive problems because they don't create repeat business. They don't necessarily help you establish a really good reputation if you're in the early part of your practice. And it means that you're always looking for new clients. And that is stressful in and of itself. So who am I and what qualifies me to share this practice-changing information with you? Well, there's a very poor resolution photo of me, Judith Cobb. We're getting that redone, hopefully in the near future. I've been a holistic health coach since 1981. You can do the math, and I don't know what your ages are, but I might have been in practice longer than you've been alive, which is neither here nor there, just an interesting fact. I've been a master herbalist since 1983, a nutritional consulting practitioner since '94, and I added the natural nutrition clinical practitioner in 2016. I'm a certified iridologist, and I've been an iridology instructor since 1990, but in 2016 I decided to affiliate with IPA and become a certified comprehensive iridology instructor with them. And I've been teaching wellness professionals like you since 1985. I love teaching. It's one of my passions. And so as I started learning information and realized that back in the early 80s there was not much information available, there were not a lot of courses, there was not much at all for nutrition or for herbology and iridology. Everything was, we didn't have the internet, so everything was hard to access. I started teaching to try to fill that gap. The wife of mom, the mom of 7, and the grandma of 7. So it's not like I don't have things to do with my day, right? And you know what I'm talking about. So we want to dive right in now. And as you have questions, I encourage you to type them in, and I will try to watch the question box as well and answer things as they come up if it's relevant to what we're talking about at that moment. If it's something that doesn't fit in with what we're talking about, I will probably delay the answer until later on in the presentation, or maybe the very end of the presentation. I want you to pretend for a moment that you have a client coming in to see you for the very first time. Her complaint is stomach pain. I need you to type in an answer here. What's the first thing you are going to do or ask? You've got a client, a female client, coming in for the very first time, and she's saying she's got stomach pain. What is the first thing you are going to do or ask? Again, I'm inviting you to type that into your question box so that we can have some conversation. Webinars are so much more fun when you're not just being talked at, but when we can actually have a conversation. Give you just a minute here to type things in, and hopefully the internet's going fast enough today to get those answers into us pretty quick. All right, got some answers coming in. Excellent. When does the stomach pain happen? That's a really great question, and that is a pertinent question. Anything else that you might want to ask this client? I'm going to share an example of why when does the stomach pain happen is so critical. So critical. Hopefully you're lightning fingers. I'm going to tell a little story now. Many, many years ago, when I had been in practice for about 8 or 9 years, a client came to me, a lovely young woman, young being a relative term because of my age, I suppose. She was in her mid-30s. And she came in complaining of stomach pain. And as we were talking, and I was asking her things like, you've suggested, when does this happen? And Joan has added a layer of question of, where does the diet feel like, what does the diet feel like, and more details on the symptoms. And as I was asking her those kinds of questions, what was her diet like, what were her symptoms, her answers were not making sense. They just didn't add up, and it didn't make sense. And it dawned on me as I was speaking with this woman, a very gentle woman. Like I said earlier, I think she was in her mid-30s. She was living with her parents, still single, a very strict Christian upbringing. And as we were talking, I realized that for her, stomach was everything from her ribs to her pubic bone. And when she was talking about stomach pain, she was talking about menstrual cramps. And I figured that out when I finally said, can you take one finger and point to exactly where the pain happens? And she pointed down below the belly button, about halfway between her hips, sort of midline. And I realized that she had been raised in such a protected and proper environment that she couldn't say the word period or menstrual cramps or anything that related to female monthly cycles. And so I had to very carefully voice those questions of, does this happen with your monthly cycle? Yes. And does it happen on the first day of your flow? Yes. So we were getting to the root of it. It wasn't actually a stomach digestive problem. It was menstrual cramps. And so you're absolutely right with the questions you said you would ask. I would add one layer to that. When they talk about stomach pain, have them literally take one finger and touch exactly where the pain is on themselves so that you can begin to correlate what organ you really need to talk about with them. When we're talking about iridology, we always want to clarify what the problem is first. Now, so many people think of iridology as a crystal ball. You know, I've had clients come in that have said to me, I'm not going to tell you what's wrong. You look in my eyes and you tell me what's wrong. That's very old school iridology, and I've had to explain to them that we can do some of the current dynamics using sclerology, but iridology is not like that. And I will tell you, the original iridology I learned 35 years ago, we did it like that. We used the iris as a crystal ball. But we've seen the research, we've done the research, and over the last 20 to 25 years, we've proven that that is not what iridology is. And so when we have a client come in, we always want to begin with a conversation that starts with, what would you like my help with? What are your concerns? And gathering a little more information about things like that. Oh, there we go. And so here is the kind of equipment that you can start with. If you are a beginner iridologist, you're just contemplating learning it, and you're thinking, wow, you know, I've heard that there's big, fancy, expensive cameras that you use, and I don't have $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 to buy a camera. I can't possibly do iridology. That's a real mistake. Some great iridology happens with simple equipment like what you see on your screen. I like to have a variety of magnifying lenses. I like to have a 10x and a 5x and a 3x. You can go to Amazon.com and buy a kit that has a lighted handle, and I don't have a picture of this on my screen, but it has a lighted handle with 3 different intensities of magnifiers that you can attach to it. It's a great deal. It's like, I think, $25 Canadian, which is such a sweet deal. So I really encourage you, if you're just starting out, don't go thinking you need to break the bank, take out a bank loan, sell a kidney on eBay, nothing like that. I'd like you to just go and get yourself a good magnifying glass or two, a good pen light that has a really white light. So you maybe want to look again on Amazon and get some pen lights that are recommended for medical, the kind that doctors would carry in their shirt pocket, because that's going to have a really white light. Or a stamp collector's light, like this, where it's a magnifying glass that has a built-in light. And actually, I like to have the two options, the light with the separate magnifier and the lighted magnifier. It allows me to move the light around, to focus on exactly what I want, and to put the light where I need it. And it's nice to have some choices. So for 50 bucks, you can get totally set up to start with your own iridology practice. Common digestive signs that we're really going to focus on today are the stomach ring, the gray border, and I originally said we were only going to cover 2 markers. These were the 2 markers I was going to focus on. And as I continued to review and refine the presentation, my feeling was, you know what, that's not going to be very helpful to these students. I want them to actually go away from this class with something that they can, if they've got a magnifying glass and a pen light, that they can actually use with the very next client they are going to see in their clinic. And so I decided to embellish this a little bit. We're going to do comb teeth, contraction furrows, and radial furrows as well, because I really do want you to get enough benefit from today that you can start using this with your very next client. I'd like, again, just a show of hands quickly, do any of you have any iridology background already? If you do, just raise your hand, and if you don't, just leave your hand down. Okay, so we're starting at ground zero. That's lovely. That's lovely. Now, when you understand the iris and the sclera, we're only going to do some iris work today. Here's what you can do, and this is so powerful for those of you who have nutrition or herbology behind you. You can integrate all of your nutrition knowledge. As you're looking at that set of eyes and you see the markers and you begin to understand what each marker means individually and how they balance off together and how they support each other in what they're teaching you, you can begin to integrate everything you know about your nutrition. But then you are going to be able to create some other things with that. If you've got herbal knowledge, same thing. You can start looking at those eyes and you can start making that short list in your brain of, these are the things I would like to teach this client about herbal health and how they can use herbs. If you're older than about 25, you've got some lifestyle knowledge, you've got some experience. You may have had health problems yourself, and that may be the particular demographic of society that you want to work with. Maybe you have gut problems, but you have done a great job of using nutrition and herbs and lifestyle to get those gut problems under control, and now you're feeling really good, and now you want to share that information with people. How powerful is that to have that part of your truth to share with everyone else? So you can integrate what you know from just your life. You can eliminate lengthy intake forms. I can't tell you how important this is. Oh my stars. In putting this information together, I have interviewed many holistic practitioners. I wanted to know how they worked, how it was working for them, what was their biggest bugaboo. And most of them talked about these lengthy intake forms. 3, 4, 5 pages. One person I interviewed said her intake form is 20 pages long. When you understand iridology, you can get rid of that. When you really look at those lengthy intake forms, most of the information on them is irrelevant to your client's case. You're basically doing a shotgun batter and you're stabbing in the dark, hoping to hit something. Iridology helps you to laser in. Iridology and sclerology will help you to prioritize which pieces of education and homework to share with your clients today, in your next session, and the session after that, as you help your client craft their health. Right? You really will not find massive success with your clients if you give them more than 2 or 3 doable pieces of homework in one session. So for example, you probably cannot tell your client, go and alkalize your diet, and then tell them everything that alkalizing the diet means, because that's a lot. That's cutting out white sugar, white flour, reducing animal proteins, getting rid of coffee and tea, getting rid of any carbonated beverages. It's being selective on certain vegetables even. And the list is pretty long. And if you give someone that much homework to do, they are going to be so overwhelmed and frustrated it's not going to work. So as you're working with them and you're just asking them briefly, tell me, do you drink coffee? Yeah, I drink 12 cups a day. Well, you know right from there, if you're talking about alkalizing, that the first thing they need to do is reduce their coffee. Can you tell them you need to cut out all 12 cups over the next month? Not likely, because that's going to be too much homework. People have emotional attachments to their food, and if we take away everything they love, they're going to run screaming, not do a bit of it. They'll decide that whatever their problems are, they'd rather have the problems than have the solution. So as you're looking at their eyes and you're asking questions because of what you see in their eyes, you're getting answers. You can begin crafting the steps. So if I was looking in someone's eyes and saw some of the markers we're going to see today, and I asked, do you drink coffee? Yes, I do. How much do you drink in a day? Oh, 10 to 12 cups. You know, we'll see a lot of progress with your health if we can begin reducing that. Do you think you could start with reducing it to 8 cups a day? Sure, 8 cups is easy, right? 8 cups is easy. We haven't taken away everything they love. They can do this. Will they feel a truckload of difference for that? No, they won't. And you'll need to say that. You'll need to teach them. We're going to move in very, very precise baby steps, because I want you to be hugely successful in baby steps rather than a massive failure in one step. If I gave you all the homework I want to give you today, you would not do any of it because it's too much. So can you stick with me to work on baby steps so that we can get you where you want to go? And 99% of the time, they're going to say yes. When you understand the iris, you can easily create bite-sized, doable pieces of homework, just like we talked about, for your clients in your client sessions. No more overwhelmed clients in your practice. And that is so important. People need to feel successful. They need to feel like they're making progress. They need to understand what they can expect from the homework you've given them. And when all of those things are made very clear, they will be more likely to onboard and be very, very compliant. Because you are able to look in their eyes, make that assessment, ask those questions, you are then able to stop spending hours of your own time unpaid putting reports together for your clients. I've spoken with nutritionists especially who produce, as if the 20-page intake wasn't bad enough, they produce a 20-page output for their clients. Oh my goodness, that's a novel, right? And that's got so much information in it. Where does your client start? How do they know which page is the most important? Which piece of information is the most important? In my opinion and in my experience, it's better to give them the novel one page at a time. And you know what else? You're going to look incredibly smart. Even if you feel insecure. So many of the people that have studied with me have come in saying, I've got all of these credentials, but I don't know how to use it, and I don't know where to start with my clients, and I feel so insecure with this. By the time I'm done with them, and actually I'm never really done with them, we complete the course and the mentoring continues. But by the time our course is finished, they're saying, wow, I get this. I look in their eyes, I know what questions to ask. Based on the answers, I know what information to give, and I can give it right there in my session with them. I'm not spending time, my own time, making reports that the client's not going to use. I'm giving them what they've paid for as they pay for it, and it's wonderful. New level of success. Let's start with that very first stomach marker. We're going to start with the stomach ring. As you look at this picture, and I'd like a show of hands on this, can you see this ring that is encircling the pupil? I call it the pom-pom zone. Can you see this thing? It looks kind of like a pom-pom all the way around. Thank you, Heather. Thank you. So I'm hoping, and Joan, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Good. So you can see exactly what we're looking at. This is actually the sphincter muscle that constricts the pupil. And we shouldn't be able to see it like this. The iris is made up of layers of cells and layers of fiber all the way through, from the beginning of the inner edge of the pupil to the outer edge of the iris. We've got layers and layers of fiber. In this zone, in the middle of the iris here, when there is one or more layer of fibers missing, it makes it thinner. And as it gets thinner, it means that we can see what's beneath it. And so when we can see this stomach ring, it tells us there are layers of fiber missing. When there are layers of fiber missing anywhere in the eye, it means there is reduced resiliency. So when we can see this stomach ring, and it's very obvious, you'll see it easily with a magnifying glass and a pen light, really easily, you want to ask about personal and family history of any kind of stomach issues. What we see in our eyes is inherited. And so it reflects genetic potential. So you want to ask the questions, and it would sound exactly like this. Do you or did anybody in your family going back, parents or grandparents or great-grandparents, if you know that, have any problems with their stomach that you're aware of? And if they go, well, no, not really, you can be more specific. And I find that being specific is really helpful. Do you have any problems with bloating or heartburn or belching? Do you burp a lot? Are there any foods that you've learned to avoid because they don't feel good when they first land in your stomach? When we see this stomach ring, it is almost always an indication of reduced stomach acid, of a reduced ability to secrete stomach acid. Now, with your nutrition background, you know how important that stomach acid is in completing the digestion of proteins. So we want to ask those questions, anything that we can, to focus in on the stomach. So if you had someone who had a lot of burping and belching going on, what kind of dietary changes would you suggest for them? Or would you be considering suggesting? Let's have you type that into your chat box. So someone is coming in saying, I burp so much, and man, sometimes I'm actually belching and it's really, really sour and I don't like it. Something's wrong. What kinds of things would you put on your short list of suggestions? It might be a dietary change. It might be a change in how they're doing things. Joan suggests better combinations of foods they eat. Yes, and be very specific. Food combining is a huge topic, as you already know, and you can't just, with huge success, say, you need to food combine. You may have to really give them menuing ideas of what that can look like on their plate, because North Americans especially are really bad for how we combine foods. Anything else you might want to suggest to them? In case you're typing, I'm going to keep chatting, but feel free to keep typing. Here we see another example of a stomach ring. And it's important to remember that this stomach ring can be white or it can be another color. And the different colors that it can be actually give us an indication as to what organ is influencing the stomach the most. So we can actually see this as being yellow or orange or brown or rust colored. And each of those colors points us to a different organ that is an auxiliary digestive organ, but is making life harder for the stomach. And so as we see these different colors in that stomach halo, we want to be asking still about, do they have digestive problems? Do they burp? Do they belch? Do they bloat? Are there foods that don't sit straight for them? And we want to be then asking about auxiliary organs as well. And I believe this is Heather. Yes, Heather says, I would suggest possible dietary changes or possibly adding digestive enzymes depending on the types of foods that are causing digestive issues. Excellent suggestion, Heather. Right on. And especially as you do what you've said, you're going to ask about what kinds of foods cause problems and then potentially match that up with the right kind of enzyme to help them along. Great suggestion. Exactly right on. Here's another example of the stomach ring being a very different color. And in this case, this is making us want to wonder about pancreas and liver. And so we see this eye and our first thought is, wow, they've come in with stomach issues and we're going to ask about actual stomach symptoms, absolutely. But because we know that color could be pancreas or could be liver, we want to then ask questions about the liver and the pancreas. So we're going to ask them if they are aware of any problems digesting fats, for instance. When they eat fats, do they feel nauseous? Do they have greasy bowel movements? We're going to ask about pancreas. Do they tend to get sugar cravings or carb cravings? Liver and pancreas both tie into the question of, is your energy like a roller coaster ride, up and down all day? So what kinds of dietary suggestions would you make for someone if you suspected liver was an issue for them? And what kinds of dietary suggestions would you make if you thought pancreas was an issue for them? So again, get some lightning fingers going on. You are doing a brilliant job with great answers here. So what kinds of dietary things would you suggest if you suspected liver? And what would you suggest if you suspected pancreas? See, with your nutrition background or with your herb background, you may not have actually thought of incorporating this kind of stuff into your work, and you may not have known that you could integrate it so easily with iridology, and that iridology could help you access what you know so easily and so well. Tell them about various digestive enzymes available. Also good to identify whether too much or too little acid. Absolutely. Yep, back to the acid question. Sorry, I didn't see these earlier. Have them drink lemon juice and see if it aggravates. Yes, to check their acid. Yes, or you could do apple cider vinegar. If so, they've got low acid. If so, low acid relates to previous question. Okay, yeah. So you can use your apple cider vinegar or your lemon juice to test and see where their acid levels are. If they don't have enough acid, then they can tolerate more of the apple cider vinegar or lemon juice. If they've got too much, which is actually pretty rare, then they won't tolerate it well at all. Good job. You know, one of my favorite suggestions for food for liver is leafy greens. The leafy greens are an excellent liver food, And for pancreas, of course, we're going to start working with building protein and reducing carbohydrates, right? And we're going to do that, again, very methodically, step by step. When we see a marker like a stomach ring, it's not a guarantee that this person is going to have a problem. Even if it is a colored stomach ring, it's not an indication that they have to have a problem. It is an indication that they have a genetic predisposition to the problem. Some people have been doing enough things right, living a very conscious lifestyle for long enough that they are really supporting their digestion, and their digestion is working very well. But because this is a genetic indicator, it suggests that there may be problems in the future. And so we always want to educate without fear-mongering to help our clients be prepared for the future, to help them possibly even ward off things that could go wrong in the future. Sometimes the stomach ring is really obvious, and sometimes, like in this photo, it's, oops, sorry, that is the wrong image. I have an extra image in my slide deck. That's most interesting. No, I don't. My apologies. I know which image I want, and I'm not finding it. This one. Here we go. See, the stomach ring in this eye is slightly obvious, and you'll notice that it's only partially colored in. A little bit of shading in other areas, but only a part of it is really obvious. We are still going to ask all the same questions. We are going to ask about the burping, belching, bloating, foods not sitting straight, and then based on the color, we are going to add the deeper levels of questions. And again, because of the color of this, we're thinking pancreas primarily, so we really want to be focusing on blood sugar levels. And another comment, I would look at sugar and carbohydrate intake with pancreas issues. Absolutely. Liver issues, I would look at the kind of toxic overload medications. Absolutely. Support could come through things like dandelion tea, good suggestion. Digestive enzymes may help support the stress on the liver. Absolutely. Well done. Well done. So quick recap here is that the constrictor muscle correlates to the stomach reflex zone. So this is the stomach reflex zone, and it is the constrictor muscle for the pupil. A stomach ring is visible when there's a layer of iris fiber missing in the nutritive zone of the iris. So this is the nutritive zone, everything from here to here. This allows the constrictor muscle to show through. The muscle may appear white or gray or pigmented. A white stomach ring suggests a genetic potential for inflammation in the stomach. Bernard Jensen taught that when the ring is darker or than the rest of the eye, it suggests a potential for low hydrochloric acid production. All right. The gray IPB. IPB is shorthand for inner pupillary border. A real mouthful, hence the IPB. So we are looking at this little band right in here. You will not see this little band on every iris you look at. And when you do see it, it warrants attention. This suggests a personal or family history of issues with the stomach lining, and it results usually in reduced digestion and the reduced ability to absorb nutrients further down the GI tract. So that makes sense, right? If the stomach can't prep the foods, especially the proteins, how will the intestines ever be able to assimilate the nutrients in them? So you might be working with a client who actually has intestinal symptoms, but the problem is a stomach problem. Does that make sense? That if the stomach's not working, the symptoms could show up in the intestines. You can't ask people, so how well do you assimilate your nutrients? Because most of them really don't know unless they have symptoms like anemia or slow healing of injuries. Or they might have low energy, but of course that can be a lot of things. They might have lab tests that show nutritional deficiencies, but you have to be really clever to get to the bottom of this. So we're going to start with asking about stomach issues again, the burping, the belching, the bloating. We're going to ask about energy levels. We are going to ask about food choices. We're going to ask about allergies. We're going to ask a lot of things. Now, you already know the stomach is really only meant to chemically finish breaking down protein. One of the best stomach supports is chewing food thoroughly. If you don't chew it well, including your proteins, the acids in the stomach simply can't do their job properly. So this whole band in here is a gray interpupillary border. Now this eye has a much narrower border, but you can see it because it has this little pokey outy edge, if you will. That's a highly technical term, by the way, pokey outy. So you're still going to ask all of the questions about interpupillary border, about the wound healing, the anemia. Those are really obvious indicators. And again, you need to remember, and I know you know this already, but just because someone is deficient in a particular nutrient doesn't mean you can fix that deficiency by throwing more of that nutrient at them. I've seen this happen, especially with anemia, and in a few slides I'll tell you a story about that. But adding more iron to an anemic person is not usually the best answer. My experience has been that, for example, people that are anemic, that where there's no obvious reason, the woman doesn't have heavy menstrual flow or anything like that, but they're just anemic, typically have very inefficient digestion and resulting very inefficient assimilation. So we need to enhance their digestion at the stomach level, and then we need to support their assimilation in order to make things work properly. So this client is a mid-30s male. He has had gut issues of one kind or another since he was a toddler. Now he has problems of bloating and gas and severe abdominal distension from the gas. And you can see really clearly the gray interpupillary border. And you can also see a stomach ring. So what do you think you get when you actually load these symptoms up, or these markers up, the gray interpupillary border and the stomach ring? You get usually lousy digestion. Having both of these together really increases the risk of leaky gut, which actually, and I'm going to give you a tidbit here I wasn't planning to, this is really suggestive of leaky gut and of gluten sensitivities and of food sensitivities overall. How would that help you if you could look in someone's eye and go, you have a marker that suggests that you probably have a high risk of leaky gut, and we can see that your stomach doesn't break proteins down, probably doesn't break proteins down as efficiently as we'd like it to, and your nutrient assimilation is poor. How would that shorten the amount of homework you have to do to help your client? This is a 72-year-old massage therapist. She's still working part-time. Lovely, lovely lady. And she reported on her very first appointment a long history of digestive issues for which she uses digestive enzymes. So again, note she has the gray interpupillary border. Note also that her stomach ring is a dirty white color. And it's you can see the light exposure is slightly different on these photos. This eye, the stomach ring, is a little bit brighter. And so we know from the get-go that she's going to need support. And the questioning for her, being a massage therapist, she has a good background. So the questioning for her was along the lines of, was she aware of any other symptoms that would suggest leaky gut, and she was. Did she have a gluten sensitivity? And she did. And was she aware of any other food sensitivities? And she was. And we were able to work from there to begin developing her program and changing some of her foods to help her along. Now, one of the real big ones when I've got a great interpupillary border in somebody that I suggest is that they get rid of coffee. It does not support digestion. I don't care what antioxidants and what different kinds of phenols you can find in coffee. Ultimately, the acid level in it is so hard on the gut that it's not going to help. And so I heard the usual bit of whining from her, but I only drink 1 cup a day. And the analogy is that's like leaving one little piece of sand in your shoe. You know, a pebble is annoying, but if you've ever gone for a walk and literally had one piece of sand in your shoe, you could feel it. You don't leave it there for very long. You stop, you take your shoe off, you shake that piece of sand out, and you get going because you want to be comfortable. Same thing is true here. Get rid of that last cup of coffee so we can make some forward progress here. You can see on a brown eye, the interpupillary border may actually appear brown or black. So it can be gray, brown, or black. This is a young man who is in his mid-20s. He has a really poor diet, and he is so addicted to the poor foods he chooses that we've had almost no success in helping him to change much of anything. He has gout, and he's had gout since his late teens, and he has a weight problem. Right, so we've got some serious addiction issues with this person to do with his foods. He's got that high sugar diet, high carb diet, and he's putting it into a body that's already struggling with digestion and assimilation. And what you've got is a classic case of overfed and undernourished with a lot of the health problems that follow. And so much of what is going on in his body he can fix by fixing his diet. When we look and we see the amount of blood vessel activity in the sclera here, each of these blood vessels speaks to a particular issue, from various digestive things to allergies to organs that are really, really carrying stress. Combined total, they shriek inflammation, systemic, deep-seated inflammation. If this young man was to clear his diet and get in control of things, if we could find a way to do that, and we will, we would find that his sclera would clear. A lot of these blood vessels would fade out, and that would be a good dynamic indicator of the success that we are having. Look closely at the very edge of these irides. Now, irides, I-R-I-D-E-S, is the correct plural for iris when we're talking about eyes. When we see this edge, and you can see how it looks like someone took little scissors and snipped in all the way around the edge, and it makes it kind of look like the teeth on a comb. This is a comb teeth border. And so when we see that, it again suggests reduced digestive function, and specifically at the stomach level. We need to ask those questions again: burping, belching, bloating, foods that don't sit straight, foods that cause discomfort. This client probably, or people with this marker, probably have learned to avoid animal proteins, especially beef, because they won't digest them well. Sometimes you'll see all of these markers in one eye, and the person will say, "Well, I can eat anything, nothing bothers me." When we have those kinds of people, what we really know is the stomach is so weak it can't scream for any help. That person has a cast iron stomach, they can put everything in it, and it's not because the stomach is strong, it's because the stomach says, "I can't do this. I absolutely can't do this. I don't have the strength." And so they will have no symptoms whatsoever in their gut, but they will usually have inflammatory symptoms elsewhere in the body. When we see this rough edge to the inner pupillary border, again, it suggests impaired nerve impulses to the stomach. These are the photos of a young woman. She's in her mid-20s, and she has the most horrible gas. She does not digest protein well at all. And when she has gas, she doesn't burp it. It goes intestinal. And when she passes it, everybody has to leave the room. It is so, so horrible. She absolutely does not digest proteins. This would be a person that I would absolutely put on a protein digestive aid, a hydrochloric acid supplement of some description. I would also get her doing what I call food sequencing. True food combining is very, very difficult for a lot of people. In North America, we've gotten too used to having proteins, carbs, and proteins, carbs, and fats all in one meal, and it's not serving us well. And people don't want to give that up. They enjoy their carbs, they enjoy their protein, they want the steak and the potatoes. So what I will have these people do is just organize how they eat their food. I'll have them start with their carbs. So they're eating their potato, their carrots, their legumes, whatever. Then I'll have them eat their leafy green salad. Big leafy green salad. Like the size of a dinner plate stacked 3 inches high, big leafy green. And then I'll have them finish with their protein. And then I'll give them a protein digestive aid. That allows the carbs to move on through the stomach, puts the buffer of the leafy greens in, so that the proteins can be in the stomach more or less alone, or more or less just with leafy greens, to allow for better digestion of the protein. Again, here's the comb teeth edge. We've said that with that last example, the young lady doesn't digest proteins well, and her gas is absolutely putrid, it's room clearing, eye watering, horrible. How do you think the odor changes if the problem is actually a problem digesting carbohydrates? What does carbohydrate flatulence smell like? I know that's a really gross question, but as holistic health practitioners, we get to talk about this. What does gas smell like if it's primarily a carbohydrate problem? Give you a minute to type that in really quickly and send it over the internet. Don't you just love the internet when you can use it to learn things? What does gas smell like? If you've got an answer and you're typing it, raise your hand so I know to wait for you. Okay, Joan, excellent, excellent. We'll wait for your answer then, Joan. Sweet, yeah, absolutely. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to smell sweet to everybody. We've all heard the saying, your own farts smell good. Okay, and I apologize for the crudeness of that statement, but we've all heard it. So when someone has a problem digesting carbs, their own gas to them doesn't smell so bad. But when they have a problem digesting proteins, it will smell bad even to them. They'll be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I just did that. Here's an example of a female client who's in her early 30s. And when we look at this, our first questions are going to be, well, we're going to notice the comb tooth border. We're going to notice that the stomach ring is a slightly different color from the rest of the eye. And, excuse me, and we notice there's a bit of an inner pupillary border here, a gray border. So we're going to ask all of the normal digestive questions. Now, this is interesting, and it goes back to what I said earlier about what you're doing with your health and your wellness on a daily basis has a lot to reflect as to what's going on. She has no symptoms. She eats a wide variety of foods. She has no gas issues. She has no digestive problems. And when I muscle test her, her gut tests strong. She tests really well. And so I asked her, of course, what's your diet like? Everything's organic. She eats an abundance of raw leafy greens, and she chews them well. She takes her time to eat. She says that her husband teases her because she takes so long to eat. She eats small portions of protein. She does a great job of putting all of the right things into place. That is minimizing her risk of having problems now. Remember that by the time we're age 35, we start to lose our digestive acids. And by the time we're 55, most of us make less than half of the digestive acids we used to make. So this client could still have problems as she gets older. But for now, she's doing so much that's right that it's preventing problems. And that presents an awesome opportunity to teach her that what she's doing is fabulous. As she gets older, she may need to shift things a little bit, maybe use a little more ginger in her food preparation, for instance, to have that act as a bit of a digestive aid for her. So there's things that we can tell now. There's things that we can teach about for the future. This is a client who is always cold, is always tired, is irritable, and anemic. Throwing iron at her would be a serious mistake. Instead, we want to go back to some of the suggestions that have already been made. Check her stomach acid level. Check to see if she's digesting her proteins, or are carbs the problem? And then support her digestion. Whenever we work with anemia, we always have to support digestion, because hemoglobin is what's called a tertiary protein. You probably already knew that. As such, it is one of the most complex types of protein your body can manufacture. So you have to have optimal protein digestion to break your dietary proteins down into amino acids, to be able to grab those amino acids and feed them to create each of these structures, so that 4 structures can be stuck together to create the heme structure for you to drop the iron into. If this structure is not properly created, the electronic bonds, the chemical bonds that draw the iron into it, will not be effective. So when we have someone who is anemic, never throw iron at them at the get-go. Start with their digestion. Many years ago, I was still wet behind the ears. This was one of my very first clients. One of my passions has always been infertility and high-risk pregnancy. So there was another herbalist here in town who had started working with this client, because this client started out as a Crohn's client, which this other herbalist does great with. But when this client got pregnant, the other herbalist was, I don't even want to deal with this. So she sent her over to me. 30-something-year-old woman, multiple bowels and gut surgeries to resection her bowel. She didn't have a large chunk of her large intestine, and she was severely anemic. They had removed the portion of her large intestine that assimilated B12. And even with B12 injections on a regular basis, this woman could not get her hemoglobin up. Here she was, 8 weeks pregnant, and her hemoglobin was 2/3 of what it should have been for normal healthy. You can't do that in pregnancy. It's not good. Being anemic puts a stress on the heart and can create all kinds of long-term down-the-road issues for mom and baby. So this client had been going in and having packed cell transfusions, which scared the daylights out of her, because this was the beginning of the AIDS revelation. And that would bring her iron up, but it would fall just as quickly. So during her pregnancy, we used protein digestive aid, which is a hydrochloric acid supplement, and we gave her, and this is a lot, 1/2 cup of the Nature Sunshine liquid chlorophyll daily. I would not have given her the chlorophyll if she would not take the protein digestive aid. And so what we managed to do over a few months was we got her iron up into the very healthy ranges. And we kept them there for the duration of her pregnancy. Her pregnancy ended up in an emergency C-section because the baby was malpresenting, her obstetrician was on vacation, and a resident that was attending did not know how to handle things. So by the time the resident decided to call in an obstetrician, it was too late to move the baby and help the baby present better. So this mom ended up with a C-section. Even with the blood loss of the C-section, her hemoglobin stayed totally within normal ranges. And of course, with breastfeeding, we continued to keep her on the protein digestive aid, and we continued to protect her hemoglobin, which meant we were enhancing her protein digestion and assimilation so she could build her hemoglobin properly. So again, when you see the comb teeth edge, you're probably also going to see a stomach ring in most cases. And you're going to really understand then that you've got what I call a double whammy happening. You've got two indicators pointing in the same direction. You're always going to ask about the personal and the family history, and you're always going to want to support the digestion while you're cleaning up the diet, getting rid of things that are not good for the digestive system. So a little recap here on comb teeth. The fibers at the edge here are loosely packed, and that's what creates the comb teeth appearance. They look it looks like we've snipped into the iris. These are actually, and this is going to lead into another topic in a few minutes, these are actually called minor radial furrows. This type of border does also suggest the predisposition towards a deficient stomach lining and reduced ability to secrete digestive acids. And here's an extreme case of showing a gray border that is so gray it's black with comb teeth with a stomach ring. I just want to mention briefly that course is coming up called Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology, and it's great for herbalists. I've had many herbalists do the course. I've had naturopaths in the course. So it doesn't matter your background. If it's holistic, you're good to go. And this course will be starting October 5th. It will be online, delivered just like we're doing right now. This course will end, oh, I did not mean to do that, will end mid-March. Registration will be opening in September. So you maybe want to stay in touch with me. If you want to know when it opens, when registration is open, you want to go to this website, and there's a pop-up box that says, do you want to get the very best iridology chart ever made by an amazing friend and mentor of mine, Bill Cardona. And if you opt in for that, you'll be added to the email list where you will be kept apprised of when the course is starting. The course will have two class groupings. There will be a 10 a.m. group, just like today, and a 6 p.m. group. So you can choose which group you want to be in, but you don't get to flip between. You've got to stick to one or the other. If you're in a time zone, say you're in the UK, the 10 a.m. group is probably going to be your choice. If you're in North America, then either or, depending on your work schedule. What will you get? What's the big picture here? You want to know what's in the package, right? And especially this far out, so you can be thinking about how will that impact me? You will learn how to create programs right in your sessions and eliminate your unpaid homework. You've started to see glimmers of that as we've worked through things. Okay, so Joan, you're saying out of town that date, could I get a replay of the option? I want you to hang tight because you're going to see some exciting things here that I think will totally answer that question for you. You will learn how to do a base assessment in 5 minutes or less without lengthy intake paperwork. You look at the eye, you determine quickly, very quickly and easy, what questions to ask, and that's your intake. and you're only going to be asking questions that are relevant rather to your client's needs. As you ask those questions and get the answers, you will be able to prioritize which problems need to be addressed first. And as you've already seen, you'll be able to connect what you know about nutrition and or herbology and or anything else you already know to what you discovered using this form of iridology. And you'll learn how to do a deeper assessment for more direction and understanding of your client's needs when it's needed. Here's a testimonial from a student who has just recently graduated from the course. This was done 7 weeks into the course. It's a lengthy course. We are 7 weeks in, and I can officially call myself an iridologist in training. I can now write an assessment and read many eyes with confidence after only 7 weeks. That's not even halfway through. The amount of learning is enormous, and there's a lot of depth to this course. Judith's teaching is professional and easy to learn as she stops for questions, has great slides, and reviews every week. Her students are her priority, and their understanding of the information is imperative to her. We do not move on to the next topic until I know everybody is comfortable with what we've covered. I would definitely recommend this course to anyone who's even thinking of taking an iridology course. Judith is a wealth of knowledge and a fantastic mentor. I love this course, and I know you will too. That's just one of many lovely letters that I've received, but we'll talk a little bit more about the course in a moment. Let's talk more about contraction furrows first. When you look at eyes, you're going to see these concentric rings in some eyes, not in all eyes. These are called contraction furrows, and as you see, we've got fibers in the eye. When the pupil gets bigger, the fibers crinkle up. When the pupil gets smaller, the fibers stretch out. So think of if you're wearing pants, for instance, and you sit down and how the fiber bunches up in the front of your hip. That's what happens when the pupil gets big. The fiber bunches up. And when you stand up again, the fibers stretch out and get smooth. But you know, if you wear that pair of pants a lot, that the crinkles happen in the same place every time, and you end up with permacrinkles, right? Same happens in your eye. These are permacrinkles. As you probably remember back to any anatomy and physiology you've done, a large pupil indicates a parasympathetic nervous system response. No, I'm sorry, a sympathetic nervous response. Scratch, scratch. Large pupil is the sympathetic nervous response, the fight or flight. A smaller pupil is the parasympathetic response, rest and digest. So how does being in the sympathetic response mode affect digestion? If you've got an answer, please raise your hand and type it in. Actually, if you've got an answer, raise your hand and I'll unmute your line. Heather, are you okay being live online? Okay, so Heather, I've opened your microphone. Hi. Do you have a microphone? Okay, Heather might not have a microphone. And there we go. Joan, I've unmuted your microphone too. Do you have a microphone?
Yes.
Hi, Joan. Hi. So when you say that it affects it negatively, what exactly happens when the sympathetic nervous system is kicking in? What exactly happens to digestion?
Digestion doesn't happen optimally at all. It basically shuts down the digestive enzymes production. It has many effects. You will not have good digestion if you are stressed, if you are angry, if you are really upset. You need to be calm and centered to have optimal digestion.
Yay! Good answer. Good answer. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to leave both of your mics unmuted now because we only have 2 of you in the program today, and it's just more fun to talk than it is to type. So thank you for that excellent answer. So how then does the digestion respond when a person goes into the parasympathetic mode? Go ahead, and if you've got an answer, just go ahead and give it to us.
The digestive enzymes will be functioning properly. You will not be tense. Your digestion functions when you are the most relaxed. In terms of everything about digestion will improve. Like, you will digest your food properly.
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Because when you are in the sympathetic mode, your body is shunting the blood away from digestion because it's just not important. It's sending it to the lungs, to the large muscles, so that you can either deck somebody, or so you can run faster than you've ever had to run because you don't want to be the bear's next meal, right? And once everything is nice and safe and sound, everything reverts. The circulation can go back to the stomach, can improve the output of digestive acids, can increase the peristaltic action, and can get things going. And Heather says she doesn't have a microphone, and you agree with what's been said. Rest and digest is the parasympathetic state. Well done, well done. So when we see an eye that has all of these rings in it, this is someone who spends more of their life in the sympathetic mode. So as soon as we see that, even regardless of what else we might see near the pupil, as soon as we see this, we know we've got to start teaching this client about relaxing when they eat, about not eating on the run, about chewing their food really well. And those are important for everybody. But for people with these contraction furrows, they are always go, 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 go. Their mind is always 4 steps ahead of where they are physically in time and space. And we need to back them down, slow them down, and get them to stop. Just stop when they're going to eat. Because digestion starts in the brain. I teach my clients that all the time, that digestion starts in the brain.
Many of them are unconscious of what they're eating while they're eating.
Yeah.
You need to focus on eating, not be distracted by what's on television, what you're reacting to emotionally. You need to be conscious of what you're eating and be in the moment of eating, not running off to something and not being even conscious half of what you're putting in your mouth, and you certainly wouldn't be chewing it properly.
Absolutely. I'm going to share a really funny story, a physician heal thyself kind of story. I used to have an office that was not in my home, and sometimes I would leave a little late and be cutting it close to get to work in time for my first client. One day I looked at the client, oh my goodness, I am late, and I didn't have time to grab lunch. I only ever worked afternoons at the clinic. And so okay, true confessions, I went through a drive-through. I went through an Arby's or an A&W or something, got a chicken burger, the best you can do with bad food, right? And I was at the window, I paid, I had my food, I unwrapped the burger, and I realized as I went down that driveway and got no more than a half a block that I'd eaten the whole burger in probably 2 minutes. And I went, oh my goodness, that was such a bad thing to do. I was so embarrassed. I was so glad I had no clients with me, because I would have been so embarrassed. First, about not allowing time to eat. Second, about eating drive-through. And third, about eating so quickly unconsciously. So important. You've hit some very important points there. Bill Cardona, who was one of my most influential iridology teachers, actually wrote a section for the textbook that I have that I use in my class, that I've written for my class. He consented to let me use some of our correspondence. He says, considering that digestive function is highly susceptible to parasympathetic-sympathetic balance, the presence of contraction furrows anywhere in the iris is a very important factor. The greater the number of contraction furrows equals the greater likelihood of sympathetic dominance, which interferes with healthy digestive function, since digestion is a resting state process. Of course, since the iris indicators are only one part of the health equation, the person must ask about their eating hygiene. Do they eat slowly, calmly, and chew their food well? Eat sitting down? Eat without great stimulus or distraction? Not eat during an upsetting emotional episode, etc. A person with significant contraction furrows certainly can compensate for sympathetic nervous system dominance by their eating habits. So exactly what we've mentioned already. So what's included with the course Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology? 20 sessions that are all live webinars. And each session, and there's another comment, I believe, and this has got to be Heather because she doesn't have a microphone. I believe there's a very strong brain-gut connection. I find most people don't realize the importance of the connection. Amen to that. Becoming self-aware is a very important part of good health. Oh yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. Back to the class. 20 sessions, live webinars. Each class is recorded in its entirety and posted on the student website. There's a password-protected student website, and you get unlimited access to that. The content is edited also into very short topic videos and stored on the student site for you to review for 18 months from our start date. So not only can you listen to the entire class from start to finish, but if you're thinking, oh, I just need to review comb teeth, there's a snippet that is just comb teeth, 3 to 5 minutes long. You've got your review without all of the back and forthing that happens in a class. I've written a digital textbook, and we make that available in weekly installments. So each week, the chapters that you need for that week will be posted to your student website in advance of class. Each class starts with a review of the previous week. So we always start with, are there any questions from anything we've covered so far in the course? And if there are, we address them. Then we review what we covered last week. Then we go into the new material, and then we do some in-class practice of the new material and everything we've covered. So we're constantly building on what we've already learned. We never leave a topic. Certificate of attendance for attending 80% of the classes live. And certification is optional. So if you actually want to become a certified iridologist, that is the course, of course, but a separate process on top of that. Not everybody needs or wants the certification aspect. Some people just want the information. So we've created it so that you have some flexibility. We also have a Facebook group for students only and for graduates. So people have finished the class where we continue the discussion. People post cases there. I post things there that are interesting, and we can chat about them there. And we make sure that you are really solid. And actually, if you do want to certify, the process is quite rigorous. And before you take your final certification exam, I have to approve you to the IPA board as being what I would consider able to pass the exam on the first try. So we work together until you've got that. So as mentioned earlier, we've got comb teeth, and they're called radial furrows. The little lines that go in are called radial furrows. So comb teeth is the edge that looks rough. The radial furrows are the lines that radiate in from that rough edge. When we're talking about them in context of the nutritive zone, they start at the pupillary edge, at the IPB, and they radiate in towards the body of the iris. And there's a few other configurations of these where they break through this line that comes around, or they start out here, but we're not going to talk about those today. These minor radials suggest a disruption in the nerve feed to the stomach, and we've hit on that brain digestion connection and how important it is. And this speaks volumes that there are disruptions in that connection. And that means that we've got the potential, the genetic potential for some negative impact on the digestive system. So what kinds of things would you suggest to support the nervous system while enhancing the digestion? Oh, I know that's going off a deep end. It's kind of not totally digestive. It's not totally stomach. But what kinds of things would you suggest?
I have to do a lot of deep breathing and get calm before I eat.
Oh, that's a brilliant suggestion. So get yourself centered with some good breathing. Excellent.
I
Anything
know
else?
when my solar plexus chakra is tense or tight that I am not totally relaxed.
Yeah, yeah.
So I know
So,
that I need to do it.
yeah, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Doing that check-in before you eat. And that is something you can teach your clients to do. Right? Teach them to take that moment. You know, in many different religions and in many people who are spiritual, they like to say grace or ask a blessing on the food. That's a great time to use that moment to connect with God or whatever you believe in, to center yourself, to bring yourself to the present at that meal, to get your digestive system and your brain connected.
As soon as I express gratitude aloud, it totally relaxes me and fills me with expanded energy.
There you go. Brilliant example. Brilliant example. Absolutely. And so those are things that we can teach our clients, and even if they're not religious, you know, even just to teach them that expressing that gratitude just for that moment is a great way to calm the system down. So important. So as we're looking at these minor radial furrows again, they do reflect that risk of an affected functioning in the digestion, and we need to have ways to counteract that. So again, if you want to get on the list, if you're not already receiving my emails, to know when the Competent Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology registration is opening, go to iridology.education and opt in for that downloadable chart, and you will be automatically added to my list. Here's another suggestion from Heather. I would support the body daily with adaptogenic herbs. Good idea. Along with the practices that you know work for yourself or the individual to support the body in dealing with daily stress. Absolutely. Adaptogenic things are brilliant. And you may want to add some calming nervine herbs depending on the person's demeanor and what goes on in their lives. That can be helpful as well. And if you loved your time with me today, again, join us for the webinar on August 23rd, where we're going to do case studies on digestion. If and when you opt in to receive that iridology chart, you will automatically be added to my newsletter list. And I always promote the webinars in there. So that's one way to totally keep up with what is the next webinar so you can get registered for it. Awesome. That is all the information I have to share with you today. Any questions about anything we've talked about?
It was certainly an excellent introduction to iridology.
Oh, thank you. Do you have an iridology background?
No, I have an RN background and I have a nutritionist background and a bachelor of arts degree. Also a foot care nurse. Also, not that I'm doing that, but I have that knowledge. I'm somebody that always has to be learning, and I certainly have a friend that practices iridology, and I actually have a lighted implement that I can look at my own eye.
Oh, great.
And my friend has been herself tracked me over the years to see the changes in my eye.
Mm-hmm.
As I changed my diet, because I can tell you what I ate when I was a registered nurse was appalling compared to what I ate after I took the holistic nutrition course when I was ill and I wanted to increase my immunity system wasn't working properly, and I had a ton of other symptoms, and I wanted to find out any way that I could help myself, and one of the ways was totally changing the way I ate.
Yes, absolutely. You know, you would love, love, love the entire dynamic iridology, Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology course. It will draw on everything you know about anatomy and physiology. It will draw on everything you know about nutrition. And if you, do you have a practice now? Do you help people?
No, I'm actually don't have to work right now, so it's kind of open season. I'm 60 years old, and I'm enjoying myself, and I'm planning on looking for a part-time job when September comes.
Oh, excellent.
I'm somebody that just thrives on new information, and the more I learn, particularly anything to do with wellness, health, the whole spectrum interests me.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I hope you'll join us for the course. And Heather says, I have appreciated time and wealth. I love to continue learning and will look into the course you have made us aware of. I have to ask you if you know June Cobb. I lived in Calgary years ago and saw her for all this. June Cobb is my mother-in-law. Yes, Heather, June Cobb is my mother-in-law. I do know June Cobb. Yeah. She was one of my early teachers. She practices a different style of iridology, but she gave me my launch, for which I am grateful, because the launch that she gave me, I have been able to build and do some amazing things with. So I am
working through Josh Gitalis's digestive course, which is very similar to running the your course. I'm still plowing through it, and I have to pause it all the time to keep writing and then unpause it. So what's a 2-hour lecture turns into a 3.5-hour lecture for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it brilliant when you are learning so much and you know you're getting your money's worth?
Much about the digestive system, way beyond what I learned in nursing.
Yeah, absolutely, right.
Nutrition course, like
yeah,
way beyond.
So powerful, and it is beneficial to do these targeted courses like this. Well, my friends, that's all I have. If there's nothing stopping you, if you're thinking I missed something, you can sign up for the evening one. We're doing this again at 6 o'clock tonight, Calgary time. But beyond that, I really hope you'll join me on August 23rd when we do some case studies. Have a great day and take good care. Bye for now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.